Welcome back to the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast. I'm your host, Scott Shagory. Here on DT, we talk about scaling tech companies and helping CEOs do that with greater ease and flow. Today, we'll be talking with Jason Vego. Jason is the founder or co-founder and CEO of Bevz. Founded in 2020, Bevz is a SaaS platform for independent liquor and convenience stores, helping them centralize and streamline delivery via third-party services such as DoorDash, UberEATS, and GrubHub. Prior to founding the company, Jason founded a dog grooming software platform, which was not successful, and kudos for being open to share that in your bio. And earlier in his career, worked at Citrix as head of global employee communications and engagement. Today we'll be talking with Jason about the unique challenges and opportunities around scaling SaaS companies for independent convenience stores. Jason, thank you for carving out time today to talk with us, and welcome to the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I guess, even with the short bio there and a few sentences, is there stuff that you'd like to add or share about, what you guys have done for your ideal audience, independents, and some of the key challenges that they've had, and I guess a little bit of your secret sauce for them?
Yeah, so what you said is really our key wedge to get into the stores, which is helping primarily independently operated and small chain convenience stores go digital, sell online through third-party delivery apps. Where we're really going, and where we've spent actually a lot more of the more recent time, has been turning that kind of wedge into a true operating system for the store. So connecting to the way they buy inventory from their distributors, sell that inventory in stores through the point of sale system, and then sell it online through all the e-commerce and delivery apps. So as we're taking this sort of next phase of Bevz, we really see ourselves more as a true inventory management and operating system that also helps them go digital. In terms of really where we're, I think, finding our niche and adding value, one key piece is just in the definition of who we are as a company and who we target, which is independently operated and small chain convenience stores. As a vertical, it is a sector that's been pretty overlooked. You take that next click down into the independent space, it's been almost entirely overlooked. So I'd say one great thing we do, which has nothing to do with our product itself, but is just building a product and set of services for this very overlooked audience. And I think the second piece is the convenience store industry is really discombobulated. There are so many different distributors that they buy from, consumers in store and online. And so where we're really adding the most value is taking all of the SKUs that a convenience store sells, tracking what happens in the store and online, and then putting into one single source of truth, which we still have work to do, but are doing pretty well for now in about 1,000 convenience stores across the U.S., and hopefully a lot more next time we talk.
Yeah, no, that was a follow-up question, but you beat me to the punch, which is, I knew that you were national, having done some prep work, but I didn't know, again, the number of stores, etc. I was reflecting on it for my small personal piece of it, where I'm a huge motorcycle fan. I'm just outside of DC in Northern Virginia. And so traveling into the rural areas of Virginia or West Virginia or, whatnot, there are lots of independent stores that a lot of people in the area do truly, rely on for many types of either food items, convenience items, all sorts of stuff. And so I can see where you would find clients who essentially are buying from maybe 50 or even 100 distributors. I don't know how, crazy that would be, but that essentially they don't have a centralized system or have never had one of any kind and wouldn't even know where to start. And therefore, the land and expand, be able to start with, even if it was what was the biggest seller, maybe it was liquor, perhaps it might be smokes of some sort or something else, even if it's convenience items. I know I've bought a few of them to keep me sustained. But that, it's probably something where they felt very overlooked, and you're solving, a massive problem once they trust you and have a feel for how your system works. Would that be a fair statement?
Oh, totally. And I think trust has been a key part for us for sure, which is, I think in any organization where you're selling anything to anyone, trust is the key part. But for us, for a group that's been someone who lacks trust in people they've bought from for a long time, because they've gone through the years of there's a period, crypto ATM machines. Imagine the amount of products that a brand comes in telling them this is the next big product that's going to sell, a tequila, a snack, a juice, or whatever. They buy it, they fill the fridge, they don't sell. And for an independent store especially, it's not that big. So if you take a fridge or a half of a fridge or even a quarter of a fridge with a type of item or a specific item and it doesn't sell, you're not just wasting space, you are missing out on the items you probably should be selling. And so, yeah, I mean, 152,000 convenience stores across the nation, 71% are independently operated. So they do make up the bulk and they have been overlooked, and we believe we can help them.
Yeah, no, it's funny. The one anecdote I'll add to this around items that don't sell is it's not so much true in Virginia here, but I've definitely been traveling out, say, into West Virginia. I have a sensitive system, so I usually bring something with me, but I also never can quite bring enough in my tank bag. And so I've gone into a few convenience stores in West Virginia. It always makes me smile. Everyone's super, super nice. But I'll ask and say, I don't see any either granola or protein bars.
Yeah.
And they always laugh at me because they, share that sort of stuff doesn't sell. And so what does sell are the usual trinkets that are, are pretty sugary that we all would be familiar with, along with some others. And it highlights a very simple reality in that you've only got so much space. If you need, it needs to justify its existence very quickly and then be able to consistently sell. And if your core audience doesn't buy that item, it's a huge loss to you on a relative basis with however that, those economics work, or in this case, don't work. So, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. You've seen a lot of, I mean, obviously I've been inside a lot of convenience and liquor stores.
Yeah.
A fair amount prior to Bevz, definitely a lot during Bevz. And it's so different across the nation on what they sell and don't sell. In the Southern California market, it's pretty standard for it to be a liquor convenience store, meaning they're selling liquor, beer, wine, and they're selling all these snacks and drinks and waters and sodas. And I think a gap in the West Virginia example you gave is I'm sure they did offer certain protein bars at some point that didn't sell.
Correct.
There's just so many questions now. Obviously, in my position, I'm going, when's the last time you tested it? What items did you test? If you got one type of protein bar, it's easily possible that wasn't of interest. And then you throw digital now and go, you have different consumers buying online. And so what we see, because we see a lot of data, especially online data, a majority of orders, like over 80%, is a alcohol item with the snack item or a soda or something like that. So I'm sure they had sodas, but as an avid protein bar eater, so that really hit me in the heartstrings. I eat 1 to 2 protein bars a day. That's a problem I have to deal with. Is that would frustrate me if I went to the same store as you. It would.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely true. I mean, we're all familiar with, I don't know, I'll use Coke as the example where there's, 8 different versions, some cold, some not, and how they go ahead and price and piece that all together. It's really quite fascinating in terms of what is effectively dynamic pricing and how you're going to be positioned. It doesn't surprise me that a lot would be alcohol, or that it might be in certain markets, particularly around college towns, if there's kids who vape and things like that, that might be a driver within the appropriate age groups and stuff. But the protein bars are always personal to me as well, because I try to make educated choices, I go to the gym and some other stuff, but it's challenging. So I do have my backups, which is usually some sort of Snickers bar or something to that effect that sort of gets me there, and then goes on. So, but yeah, it's easy to see where again it's a very neglected and fragmented market that has been neglected for long periods of time, or where it's just dominated by the usual suspects. They carry Coke, they carry alcohol of some sort, whatever the beer preference is, or other things, and then a few smattering of other things, and that's it, along with some oil. So interesting. What does scale look like to you and the team right now? You highlighted a little bit of it a few minutes ago, but with what you're comfortable sharing, what does that look like for you guys, say, over the next 18 months or something like that?
Yeah, so when I think of scale, I think of it in 2 lanes for myself. One is purely the more traditional sense of it, of just how big are we going to get? The second is really the product side. I'll start with that because I think that really fuels the growth. So as I mentioned, our wedge into stores was e-commerce facilitation. We've really dove into sort of point of sale integration and tracking in store with some proprietary technology we've been working on, with the third layer being what do they buy. And so I think scale to us first and foremost is proving out that operating system and turning all of our stores into a ultimate inventory management and digital inventory software. I mean, things like you talked about, which is what should you be selling? When should you be selling it? How much should you buy of it? What should you price it? Should you price it differently in store, online? To me, the data piece is really fascinating and where I see kind of scale looking from a growth standpoint, next 18 months. I mean, we're fundraising right now. We're looking to raise some money, which we expect to fuel about 2 to 3x annual growth. So just mathematically, I'm hoping to be at, 2 to 3,000 stores in the next couple of years. I don't know if I consider that scale though. I think when I'm really thinking of scale, we're 5,000 plus. 10,000 is sort of the magic number we've been aiming for a long time. Maybe because it's just a big round number with a second digit added to it. But I think it's at that scale, we have enough market share and enough data where we really can help the store make better decisions. And then the next layer, which maybe we'll talk about later, is the brands want this information because they're also not trying to blindly sell products the stores don't want to sell. Nobody wins if Coke just sells all of their products to liquor stores and they don't sell 80% of them. They should allocate time elsewhere. So that's how I see scale, those two angles.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. Many of the founders that I talk to tend to have if you will, a single track in terms of conversation about scale, whereas obviously yours is very much about the product in addition to being about the data, the analytics, and the platform built around it, and then ultimately serving people and the communication that kind of ties that all together because, as you alluded to or talked about early on, it's very much about trust, where a lot of proprietors, I would guess, with a single store, maybe it's 2 or 3 stores in a local market, they are working incredibly hard to juggle that and many, many tasks, employees to lots of other stuff, and to be able to have some insight or deeper insight into what's going on and then be able to tie that back to, a large food purveyor, or maybe it's the local or regional distributor, I would think would be enormously powerful to them, particularly where it's very enabling for them. It's not just about sharing data. It's about actually making, far better decisions and just being able to serve other people or their clients, those who see them 2 times a day that come in a way that they haven't been able to do in the past. Is that a fair statement in terms of what they ask of yourselves, or that kind of bubbles up as part of the conversation, or is it mostly around managing inventory and it's about the platform itself, or has it begun or has it been ongoing in terms of how they end up communicating or sharing about what it is that's going on for them?
Yeah, so we're getting some conversations, not an insane amount of these more sophisticated future looks. I think a lot of store owners are still really early in their digital journey. For our more sophisticated retailers, absolutely. They're not just talking about digital or inventory management. They're talking about pricing and what should they be pricing and how can they sort of increase their margins across different channels, all of that kind of good stuff. Yep. I think the overarching feeling though is what you were talking about, which is so many distributors, right? It is usually 50 to 100 that they're dealing with, one individual store. For us, even crazier because different locations in states and cities, they have 50 to 100 distributors, but they're not the same ones that are in another state. So we're eventually going to have just a ridiculous amount. But they're looking at these distributors and just going, keeping stock of the products I want. Theft is a big one, or not knowing if theft is happening or not. Spoilage is a big one. Today, almost all of these stores do not have an effective way to run their business without going to the store. They either need a manager or someone who is fantastic, which is a struggle for most of these stores to find at a price they can afford, or they're going to the store daily or at least weekly. And as someone who is a digital native and works in tech, I'm going, we're not building rockets here. We should be able to give you a solution that knows what you buy, knows what you sell. And then yes, you can track inventory, but you can do things at home. You can get recommended sort of AI tools that tell you what to price, when to price, how to sort of really grow your business. And I'd like to see this West Virginia store dabble with some more protein bars, try a few, see where they sell. And I would argue, based on what I see nationally, and obviously different across states, but nationally, that there is probably a gap with a store like that who is not just protein bars, but should be more thoughtful about the snacks and items. And just, I mean, I can go on about this kind of stuff, but the consumer trends are changing so fast. It's like 40, 50 years ago, you'd go into a C store and it would be, you know, a few types of beer, light, dark, whatever, right? A few types of snacks. Like we're seeing even Hershey's just invested in a company that's like healthy popcorn. And so we're just going to see a trend of your store is going to need to really know that hyper local audience, and it may be healthier. Maybe it's less healthy items. I don't know. I hope it's healthier items, but it's going to be a fascinating mix. And we like to believe I think we were a little early, frankly. We launched in 2020 and we were kind of like just as the pandemic was hitting, but we stayed alive and we're here now. And I think now is this fantastic time of the shift we're seeing in our space.
Yeah, no, I think just anecdotally, and I'm in no way a specialist here, but have observed and obviously read a number of pieces, whether it's Unilever, whether it's the other, you know, I'll call it global players to others, have continued to notice some small but significant shifts in, you know, snack foods, chips, all sorts of little areas. And whether you talk about it in the context of Ozempic or semaglutide, or you talk about it in terms of other just shifts and so forth. Some perhaps a result of, you know, personal or political views, or it might be other things that there is a lot going on, I think, underneath the surface. And so I guess, you know, adding on to this as a question would be, you've obviously got a data platform, you've got a lot of different, if you will, data touch points. How do you guys go ahead and either uncover or think about what I refer to as deep intel? So you're making or providing people with decision superiority over customers or over from competitors in the markets that they happen to work. This is very fragmented, but do you find that you need to do that vis-a-vis distributors, or is it just focused on, maybe I'll just stop there. How you guys tend to think about that intel and then the decision superiority that you've developed and look forward to augmenting down the road?
Yeah, I think the easier answer, but honestly not the key answer for us today, is around the data. We track what they're selling. With enough scale, with enough stores, we can have pretty interesting projections and sort of understanding of what's going on.
Yep.
I actually think that's more like a 5 years out where that becomes my ultimately like pure answer that I would give you back. Today, especially as an early stage startup, the data is interesting, but even then, like, because locations are so different, we have several hundred stores in California, but we don't have several hundred stores in Los Angeles County. And we definitely don't have several hundred stores in like one city or zip code in LA County. And so when you're looking at these trends, I can't just tell a store who lives in Beverly Hills that my California recommendations will match. So I still think our data is light, which is why the scale question I answered earlier is you kind of get to 5 to 10,000. We have really good recommendations. But I think my true answer is really as simple as talking to our customers, talking to stores. It's a lot of word of mouth. It's a lot of verbal conversations, both phone and in person. We go visit a lot of these stores. I mean, how we acquired a lot of our stores was at some point an in-person conversation. And a challenge we have is they'll often tell us their biggest challenges, frustrations, very specific to like e-commerce, because that's where they know us as. And it is harder to dig that one layer deeper of outside. Okay, pretend, I've had to say this so many times, pretend Bevz doesn't exist. We don't exist. We're not a partner of yours. What are your biggest problems? And it still goes, well, we want you to get another delivery app or something like that. And so I think my short answer really is customer conversations. And I've been doing more of these I did a lot in the early days. Then I kind of tapered back a little. And I think I shouldn't have tapered back so much. And now I'm trying to have more sort of ongoing. Nothing beats an actual human conversation with these customers to figure out what they need, how we uncover it, how we support them. And I hope we can be more of a data-driven company over time, but we're pretty sort of qualitative today.
Yeah. Well, I think, the paradox here is that you're now known for something, which is awesome. In addition to that, you're now known for something in their minds that they don't forget, which is obviously around what you just shared. It just means you're going to be on their journey or side by side collaborating about the bigger conversation around data, because they probably never had a data conversation before or don't think of it in that context. And so to be there to deliver those insights, not just about their store or set of them, but also those that are, if you will, broader. We'll say the California market versus something else, I think is, going to attribute, again, that insight, that organized genius that you guys bring to the marketplace in a way that no one else is going to be able to provide, because you've got an incredibly strong trust bond there, and that people are, I think, in my view, oftentimes will confer respect and then confer belief in a way that they wouldn't do so otherwise. So I think the time spent, if you will, boots on the ground, if we can call it that, or maybe it's sneakers, to be more comfortable, just is, I think, really powerful. And again, this is a market where people have just blown them off or just couldn't really help them because they were too small. If you're Coke or you're a distributor and you're big, are you really going to be able to dig into that for them or on their behalf? And the answer is probably not, no. So, to be there to take that time is powerful, I think.
Yeah. Something really interesting too, based on that comment, is kind of a couple thoughts. Is one is, can Coca-Cola do that, right? Well, what we're finding today is the big supplier distributors like an Anheuser-Busch or a Miller Coors, like the beer companies, they are physically sending humans to a lot of our stores, a large majority of our stores, going in on a weekly basis, putting a snow jacket in and counting items. No joke. And it takes almost an hour. And that quote unquote sales rep only gets like 5 minutes to actually sell, right? One, they're tapering back a little bit. And two, small, medium, even fairly large companies cannot do that. And so that dynamic is really changing. And I think from the data perspective is like, even think for you as a consumer or me as a consumer, if you tracked what I purchase at a grocery store like Kroger, it's not actually representative of me as a customer in my city, because I'm going to the grocery store to go grocery shopping. And I may, grab a bottle of wine or something else, but really my behavior and the consumer interest at the hyper-local level is just not tracked or shared at all. And so I think, some stores do better, some stores do worse. I think we're going to see a massive shift with companies like ours, not just in our space, right? So I tried to start a dog grooming software platform. I saw another one just pop up in Los Angeles. So it's like these things are going to start to happen where I know privacy can be a challenging conversation. I lean more in the world of the more data we can all sort of share in a effective, appropriate way, the more we're just going to find the things we want more easily, faster, at a better price. And I hope that we can help the independents pull that off, would be sort of our vision. And I think we can in our space, at least because it's so dominant by them.
Yeah, no, I think, what gets lost, and you've highlighted it, is the human story in all of, if you will, the data or people's hyper excitement over AI, and that human story often gets lost, but that's who's actually buying. Is actually a human or one or more of them together that are buying a set of items, and maybe it's the same thing every single Friday night at 4:30 after they get off at work, or maybe it's random items depending on what sporting event is coming out and how long that sporting event's going to be, or a million other micro decisions that somebody's going to go ahead and make and figure out whether they want that protein bar or whether they want the Snickers bar. And so it does just vary a lot in terms of, I think, what is that ideal customer, because they would probably have many of them in lots of different ways. And in which day of the week? Is it workmen during the week cruising through as they always do for their sandwich and something else, or is it that big buy at the end of the week for the guys or something else? And so again, the level of complexity and then what you say about understanding at a micro level what it is that particular community or single store or time of day, et cetera, does is just really varied, given how hustling and bustling most of these little convenience stores are outside of quiet times and stuff like that. So yeah.
No, it's fascinating.
Yep, it is. I've again, usually when I've been a little bit tired or I've needed a break midday, it is fascinating at certain times. So at 2:30, it's usually quiet if I happen to stop on my bike. But if it's 12:30 or something, usually those places are just absolutely hopping away. And it's fascinating just to see the varied number of people cruising in and cruising out, doing their own thing at a million miles an hour. And there's a lot going on, and it varies significantly. So yeah, the business and the strategy guy in me always takes over, even if I'm tired, slurping on my Gatorade and something not healthy. So it's just kind of cool to see, commerce activity, the way we always understood it, but in all sorts of interesting ways that, we wouldn't necessarily think of if we didn't take the step back and take the time to look at it.
Exactly.
Yeah. What do you think, because we've covered a lot of ground here, but I am curious about this, and I always like to ask, what do you think is most misunderstood by the market about what you guys do? And if it's about what you do now versus in the future, given how you've, talked about scale, or if you want to use other stakeholders, financial folks as you're raising money. But what do you think is misunderstood by the market today about what you guys do?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about kind of us and our pivot and our transition. I think I've talked enough about that. I'll give more of a macro view of, I think, the misunderstanding.
Yeah.
One huge misunderstanding is the power and necessity of the independently operated store. It's no matter who I talk to, even when I give big numbers like 71% are independently operated small chain, it comes back to anyone looking kind of at the 3,000 foot view. They're looking at big distributors, big brands, big retailers, right? Total Wine or this. And I meet brands all the time that are going, it's too tedious, or I can't get to the independents. And I'm going, maybe you're right. I'm not a brand owner by any means, but I think a big misconception is figuring out a way to be in more of the independents is key to sort of bolstering up a brand. And I think pairing that with e-commerce. I think part one was really the space itself and the importance of the independent. It's not just volume of a single store. It is when you look at them holistically, right? I think that's the big gap. I think the second misunderstanding, I think, is where it will go from an e-commerce standpoint. Because it's so far behind, there's a lot of assumption that it's not ever going to catch up, right? Which is, our studies show that convenience retailers are about 20 years behind a typical retailer for e-commerce volume. So we see an average retailer like in the US is doing like 16% of their sales via e-commerce, we've seen. Our stores, like 1%. And so there is a belief it's just too far behind, it'll never get there. And I argue the reverse, which is it's going to get there, and it's going to get there much faster because technology is a lot better today than it was 20 years ago when retailers were doing it, with the nuances of like liquor laws and certifications that mean Amazon cannot just start selling liquor online. They have to follow the federal laws. But I think there is a big misconception on where these independents will go. And it's either going to be them with tools like Bevz, or they're going to be replaced and have some form of e-commerce. So those are the two I think I get the biggest misconception, unless I'm wrong, in which it's not a misconception. But I think I'm right in where we're seeing this go.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I hadn't really considered that before, but virtually everyone, not absolutely so, but so many people have a huge mobile computing device in their hand that they just couldn't put down if their lives depended on it, and could easily, as long as there is a cell phone connection of some type, there's connectivity there. There's no reason why somebody couldn't go ahead and place an order. It might not be their behavior today, because they're swinging through town and need to do so anyway to do, pick up fuel or do other sorts of stuff. And so they'll just stop by as opposed to order it on, quote unquote, online, but, or have it be delivered to their house if they're across town or something. But I would think that, that there would be a speed up version of that from what it is if it's just, such a small amount at this point. But that makes perfect sense, really. I think your position, that is. Yeah.
Yeah. And I even think of like a layer of this being similar to Starbucks. So I trust Starbucks. I know what they have. It's not that, I guess you can customize a million things, but generally speaking, the menu isn't that crazy. But me and a lot of people I know do the mobile order online for pickup, right? They're not getting the coffee delivered because they want it hot, but you do the mobile order, you show up, you don't have to worry about waiting in line or or any of
Yep.
that kind of stuff. And I think there's a chicken and the egg problem in the convenience store space, which is you can't do that. You literally can do it, right? Which is you could go on one of the delivery apps or the store's website. There's a high probability, unless they're using a tool like Bevz, that they don't accurately portray their inventory. And so I think especially in a convenience store where you're going, there's just so much stuff there. Like I'm stopping for beer on the way home, or I'm like a wine drinker and I want a certain type of wine or a certain type of craft beer. And I can see it's on there, then I'm going to order it, pick it up, pay for it, cut the line, go grab my stuff. I think that's going to happen more and more. But the chicken and the egg problem is they have to get the inventory right. The behavior is not going to change. We've seen customers do it, and then they go pick up, and they're like, "I don't have that. I gave you a different wine." And you're like, "I didn't want that wine." So
Yeah.
it's a fascinating time, and as a maybe I'm more avid with my mobile device than average given my day-to-day life, but I just think people want convenience and they want time back, and waiting in line is not something I hear most people begging to do.
Yeah, no, waiting in line is perhaps one of the least exciting things. And for Americans, we are very convenience oriented. I have a number of European friends who will not drink coffee in their car or their truck.
Mm-hmm.
They will stop. They will drink it outside or in the thing, and it will be not in a mobile cup, so to speak. It will be in a
Yep.
traditional cup, and they will complete it, and then they will go ahead and leave and continue on with their day. And the idea of what we Americans do seems relatively barbaric. So
Yep.
it's absolutely true where we are very exceptionally convenience oriented, and so to have that is just hugely important, whether we think it's healthy or whether we don't.
Well, hopefully it's more healthy than less as the trends change. My two hopes for our industry, and we're starting to see the trend, is more healthy items and more international items. I just think there's really cool, unique foods and snacks that are international. We're seeing it come with sake, soju, things like that, and snacks, but it's not going to be in every location, and we only have so much control. In the end, I'm not the retailer. We are a convenience store provider to help them make the decisions, but generally, we're seeing trending upward toward healthy and international oriented foods.
Yeah, no, that would
We'll
be
see.
cool. I look forward to that in West Virginia when I'm traveling out
Yeah.
there. So cool. Well, let's go ahead and take a short break, and we will be right back. Purple Finch Group helps technology CEOs innovating at the edge of chaos create operational fitness across their technology stack and team of talent. Achieving significant and measurable scale, selling your story, and finding time to think and plan can feel like a bridge too far. So if you're a CEO whose company has found product market fit, but is struggling, or you're a CEO whose company is looking to accelerate existing momentum, we can help with proven blueprints for optimal scale. Shifting from incremental addition to exponential multiplication can be absolutely achieved with less effort and stress. To get in touch, I can be reached at Scott with two T's at purplefinchgroup.com. Now, back to the interview. Well, we are back with Jason here, and we're going to take a little bit of a pivot in terms of questions here and ask, Jason, what type of work, the work that you do now as CEO, gives you joy and energy, and hopefully there's some joy and energy in the CEO role that you've got.
There's a lot of energy draining, but no, there's also a lot of energy building. I think two areas for me are really energy building. One is the nerdier answer, but is I love the operations finance side. So really digging into sort of processes, procedures, project strategy, analyzing the numbers and the data, especially in our space where we get a lot of data. Now I'm getting a little overwhelmed, but now even with AI tools, I can weed through that data very easily. And so financial modeling, projecting where we can go, how we get there is enjoyable. Weirdly, it's a flow activity for me. So sometimes I get lost in my Excel sheet. It's hours later and I'm like, that wasn't the best use of my time. But I do actually really like that. And I think I have to talk to people so often throughout the day that a deep dive into an Excel model actually is like a cool down. The part that's really energy building for me is the internal people side. So has come with a lot of the challenges and mistakes that impact people's lives when I do it poorly. So those have been the hardest. But really today, when I look at the team, finding great people, especially either younger or less experienced, and helping train them, build them up, give them free reign and opportunity to grow their career, and then see them kind of come around and make big impact to the business in a way I couldn't is really the most energy building. And I think I used to do culture and like employee engagement as a career. That was my whole career. And I thought I knew it quite well. But go into a company where you're building it from the ground up as it's shifting and changing, and doing that with every person you bring in and keep and grow was like a way bigger change. And so I when it's going well or well enough, I get the major highs off the way we kind of grow this team.
Yeah. How big are you? I mean, you guys have been around for 5 years now, obviously raising capital. That's great. What do you guys look like in terms of either size or full-time equivalents? And in terms of the team, are you guys distributed as many are, or do you guys have a centralized like office or location, or how do you guys work and handle that side of things?
Yeah, so we're about 20 people. We are international and definitely dispersed through the US. We were founded in Los Angeles, California, so our founding team is here. Though one of our team members left us and moved to Seattle, but still with the company. But generally, we've had the founding team here. I think that was a pretty critical component of just getting off the ground, the pivot, all of that. So we do still some in-person meetings. We gone on and off of having a small office because just for cost purposes, there was a period we like never went to it. And LA is so big that sometimes you go, it's like we're all in different states almost because we're so far away. But we have about like a fifth of the company in LA. Then we have our sales reps in different territories, because even though we do a lot of inside sales, phone calls, we also do in-person visits, we schedule appointments. So we've really kind of dispersed throughout the US for a handful of salespeople. Customer success, we've decided wherever we find the best talent. And then most of our software development team is based in the Philippines. And so, yeah, we have people, Philippines, Argentina, throughout the US, and give and takes of, as we're scaling, I wish we were all together more often. So my hope is going forward, we can bring more of the team together more often, but we are dispersed today.
Yeah, no, and that's always a challenge, because obviously you want to focus on the quality of the talent and the right mix of people. And it's certainly the case where there's advantages to going to the Philippines. There are several people who I know who have companies that employ, have several hundred developers focused in the Philippines, and that can work exceptionally well. Some prefer the team or the dev team to be at least within just a 2 or 3 hour difference. So we'll call it North America vertically, or the Americas, and that just makes life a little bit easier for just simple day-to-day communication. But others, again, it really tends to vary as to how teams, and then like you say, it's organically growing and changing each and every month in terms of what that looks like. So you don't always have, I think, sometimes the granular quote unquote control, because you're just trying to solve a problem, and the team's being pushed and you need to find somebody. And if they're great and they're 10 hours away or 10 time zones away, you choose them if they're the right person. Why would you not go ahead and try and make that work? So often, at least in my view anyway, talking with lots of founders, it's always, there's never a perfect solution, and you're always trying to just optimize for what you think you need now and maybe over the next 6 months or something like that, and go from there. Is that fair?
That is absolutely fair. And yeah, you find the best people, you put them in the right seats, and sometimes you want to hire more locally, sometimes you don't. And I think as we have more money and more resources, I'll be a little more focused on hiring locally, but still we just find such great talent internationally, and we make the hours work, at least so far.
Yep. Nope. And that is perfectly fair. In terms of one of the last questions to ask you here is, you've obviously had quite a journey to date. You obviously had the grooming biz. You've obviously started this. You've been working on it for 5 years now. With your journey to date as a CEO and as a founder, with both labels above your head, how has being CEO of the company, we'll maybe talk with the current company, kind of transformed you? Is there a single transformation, or has there been something else there that you want to highlight?
Yeah, I think it's definitely been more of an ongoing bumpy transformation. I can't really, it's a great question on was there a set of singular moments that really kind of had an up level? I don't think so. I think there were a couple singular moments that had the result that made me realize the work was
Hmm.
the right set of work. But obviously, hindsight is great now, where I go, yes, it was. If
Hmm.
that outcome didn't happen, the growth and the work still happened in the same way. So I don't think there was any, again, like
Yeah.
singular growth moment. I think for me, it's been across the board. I think as someone who cares a lot about the customer, about employees, and I'm sure like every CEO, I hope, says some extent of caring about their people and customers. But I've
Yeah.
definitely had even a mental and emotional journey around caring so much about like
Hmm.
my team and putting a lot on my own back and making the mistakes that affect other people. The bigger we get, my mistakes or lack of correct choices like really affect more people. That
Hmm.
one's really hard for me still today. But overall, it's been this kind of just bumpy upward and to the right growth as a leader, as a human, as a coach, as a just a set of skill sets, right? Like I'll give one example was before Bevz, I never fundraised before. So my previous companies, when I worked
Hmm.
in big tech, I was never on the fundraising side. It was a skill I did not have, and I felt like with pretty good communication skills and knowledge of my business, I could go raise, read all the books, and I mean, I looked stupid when I was fundraising in the early days. The things I said to raise money, it was I would rip myself apart if I were now my coach back then. And now I've obviously successfully raised a few rounds. And so just I guess outside of just the human growth, I think a ton of just obviously skill set growth, like fundraising, financial modeling, project
Hmm.
management, all of that. So it's a anyone looking to learn and grow really fast. You don't have to be a CEO, but working in an early stage startup, you get to do everything. And so it's been a incredible learning journey for me.
Yeah. No, I think the finance piece or raising money or even attempting to raise money, even if you ultimately decide not to, or it's, quote unquote, not successful, I don't think that's true because you end up learning so much as you've articulated about yourself, about the team, about your market, questions that get asked, even if it's trial by fire and not a very pleasant experience. Many VC are not always the most patient folks in the world, but then they get pitched 100 times a day and get jaded themselves. Where I think just the skill sets and the compression of learning, whether you're 25 or whether you're 55, it really doesn't matter. And to be able to concisely tell your story and understand who it is that you need to be sharing that with, whether it is the idea or you're selling progress, understanding that financial product. And I think for me, in talking with founders, one big challenge is their technical skills are often off the charts. They've got loads and loads of that. The neglect has been, if they were going to raise money, is understanding the financial product that they are creating just right alongside that, and then allow whomever you're talking to in the financial space just to have that type of communication and be, if you will, respectful to them about
Yeah.
what that is. And if they're interested in the tech, which obviously they should be, they'll go ahead and ask you relevant questions within their specialty, or even just if it's to introduce you to somebody else. And I just think that often doesn't get shared with enough founders. It's easy to focus on your strengths, but it's not always as fun to focus on
Yeah.
those things that are not as strong or that you just don't know about and don't know how to even really start and wrap your arms or wrap your hands around. So there's, yeah, always some challenges there, and you obviously have experienced that yourself.
Yeah, I think definitely an interesting component of fundraising or anything similar. There's also this gap of like, it's not really running the business. Of course, financing the company is, but like the day-to-day activity, if I went and reached out to and pitched 50 investors and nothing happened out of it, I did not help the company in any way, shape,
Hmm.
or form. Maybe
Yeah.
I learned a few things, got some decent advice from an investor, but how far can they really go in 1 to 2 meetings, right? And so I
Hmm.
do see that too, where there's like I had a big frustration that I just had to come to terms with, and other founders I've advised, same story is like, we have such limited resources. I want to run the business. Why I founded this thing in the first place is to do the company. And it's like, that's great. I agree. Except if you run out of money in 6 months, there's no company to be there. And so there's even that gap of like, don't want to, let alone learn this new skill set. Really tricky. And we've sort of been in survival mode a few times. And there are a few times I'm really wishing I could be more in the business, but I can't. And I have to go raise money. And it was like learning an entirely new skill set. It's a blend of things, just like any other skill set. I couldn't just go code the platform for Bevz today. I'm not technical, but if I had to, I'm sure I could learn different software skills. And so interesting dynamic of VC-backed startups, of this sort of like job that can be a full-time job that in some ways has literally no effect on the actual core business.
Yeah, no. And then just the understanding, and you've highlighted it even implicitly here, is that, there are at times fires that you just have to let burn. It's really, really painful, but if you're going to raise money or you're focused on a series of 4 or 5 initiatives or whatever that landscape looks like, inevitably there are trade-offs, and sometimes there are people that, you might want to do a better job with. I interviewed someone about a month ago, and she said, yeah, we are product-led growth 100%. And if I lose somebody, I could spend time chasing them and figure out what it is that caused them to leave, even if they were an original customer. The challenge is I can't do that. I have to understand that I'm going to not only lose customers, we all do, but that I can't spend the time going ahead and chasing them. And so it's just, I think, hard to sometimes accept that, where we want to either learn or we want to try and serve at the very highest level to everyone at all times. And it's just not always possible. It's just not something that can be done and done at 100%.
No, not at all. In big and small companies, it's focus, they say.
Yeah, no. Well, I really appreciate you carving out time to chat with us. As a last question, how would you like people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is probably the best place. I'm fairly active, especially when I'm in fundraising mode. So if I'm slightly annoying right now, it will tone down after a few months when I'm done fundraising again. Yep. But I share at least like the monthly Bevz updates, things like that. You can also shoot me an email, jason@bevz.com, or the website, bevz.com, but I'm not super active in other areas, so those are the places.
Gotcha. Nope. LinkedIn is a popular place, including for myself. So I think for my audience here, which are other tech CEOs and tech leaders, they'll certainly go ahead and understand that. Well, once again, Jason, I really appreciate you carving out time to talk about the company. It's really exciting. And folks, we will be back with another episode very soon. Cheers. Thank you for tuning into the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast, and we hope you found the episode valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast on your favorite platform and leave a review. Putting this podcast together is a group effort, so I'd like to provide a shout out to Heartcast Media and their team for all of the assistance they provide with each episode. If you want to get in touch with me directly, I can be reached at Scott with 2 T's at purplefinchgroup.com. Purple Finch Group is the sponsor of this podcast. We have another podcast episode out very shortly. Stay tuned.